The wind howled through the narrow alleyways of the city like a wounded animal. Snow mixed with freezing rain pelted the concrete in sheets, turning gutters into icy streams, and blanketing everything in a slushy, bone-deep cold. Street lights flickered through the haze, casting weak halos of yellow that barely pierced the night. Emily sat beneath the overhang of an abandoned storefront, her knees pulled tightly to her chest, a threadbare blanket wrapped around her thin frame. She was 17, but life had forced her to grow older than her years. Her mother had passed away the previous spring, cancer, and with her gone, there was no one left to shield Emily from her father's drunken rages. 6 months ago, she left home with a backpack, some old clothes, and a fading picture of her mom. Since then, the streets had been her reality. She hadn't eaten all day. Her hands trembled as she reached into her pocket and pulled out her last possession of value, a single stale slice of bread, wrapped carefully in a crumpled napkin. It was hard around the edges, but it was food. Her stomach ached with hunger, but she took small bites, trying to make it last, trying to pretend she wasn't shivering with both cold and emptiness. Then, a noise. She looked up, instantly alert. Her instincts were sharp now. Danger came in many forms on the street, but this wasn't a person. From the shadows through the falling sleet, a shape emerged, low, cautious and trembling. A large German shepherd stepped into the light, its coat soaked and matted with dirt, ribs showing through its skin. Its ears were half flattened, not in aggression but fear. Its eyes flickered between survival and defeat. Emily froze, holding her breath. The dog stopped a few feet away, watching her with cautious eyes, its nose twitching. She saw it then. The same hunger, the same weariness, the same desperation. For a long moment neither moved. Then, slowly, Emily looked down at her slice of bread. She hesitated. This was all she had. But something inside her shifted. A memory, maybe. Her mother's voice, soft and distant. When you have nothing left, kindness still costs nothing. Emily broke the slice in two, her fingers stiff and red from the cold. She held out one half toward the dog, palm up. "It's not much," she whispered, "but it's something." The dog didn't move. She placed the bread gently on the ground in front of her and leaned back, giving it space. After several seconds, the dog crept forward, step by step, until it reached the bread. It sniffed once, twice, then gently took the offering in its mouth. It didn't gulp it down like a wild animal. It chewed slowly, watching her the whole time, as if waiting to see if the kindness would be taken back. When it finished, the dog sat. Then, without a sound, it lay down beside her, curling its large body against her side. Emily tensed, surprised, but then gradually she relaxed into the warmth. The dog rested its head on her knee, letting out a long, exhausted sigh. She didn't know why it had come to her. She didn't know if it would stay. But that night, under a leaking overhang in the heart of a frozen city, two lost souls found a moment of peace, sharing warmth, bread, and the quiet beginning of something neither of them had felt in a long time. Not fear, not hunger, but hope. In the days that followed, the snow didn't let up, but neither did the bond that had begun on that freezing night. Emily woke the next morning with the weight of the German shepherd still pressed against her side. His body was warm, and despite the damp cold seeping through the concrete beneath them, she'd slept better than she had in weeks. The dog stirred when she did, rising slowly, stretching with a soft groan, then shaking the frost from his fur. He didn't leave. Wherever she went, he followed, silent, alert, never more than a few feet behind her. He walked when she walked. He sat when she paused. He even lay down beside her while she sifted through dumpsters behind closed restaurants, hoping for scraps. So she gave him a name, Shadow. It fit him perfectly. He moved like one. Quiet, steady, loyal, and he was always there, as if he had decided from that first night that Emily was his to watch over. She began to notice things. Shadow responded to sounds sharply, turning at distant whistles, perking his ears at footsteps. He didn't flinch when trucks roared by, and he sat immediately when she said the word stay, even before she realized she'd said it with authority. He was trained. Someone, somewhere, had taught him commands, had raised him to obey, to protect. Whoever had owned him before had let him go, and now, somehow, he belonged to her. One night, about a week after they'd met, Emily found shelter beneath an old pedestrian bridge. The stone arch gave some protection from the biting wind, and there was a cardboard box left by another traveler that made for decent insulation. She curled up beside Shadow, who lay between her and the open path as if to keep the world at bay. That's when it happened. She heard the shuffle of footsteps, slow and uneven. Then the voice, slurred, mumbling. A man, maybe in his 50s, stumbled toward the bridge entrance. His eyes were wild, clothes soaked, the unmistakable stench of liquor clinging to him. He spotted Emily in the shadows. "What you got there, girl?" he slurred. "Bet you got something in that bag." Emily shrank back, clutching her small pack of belongings. Her voice caught in her throat. The man stepped forward. Then a low growl rumbled through the darkness. Shadow rose. He positioned himself directly in front of Emily, shoulders squared, head low, teeth slightly bared. The growl deepened. The man froze. Shadow took a step forward and barked. Once, sharp and deep, the sound echoed under the bridge like a warning bell. The man raised his hands, backing away. All right, wasn't looking for trouble." He turned and stumbled into the night. Emily sat still for a long moment, her heart pounding. Then she reached forward, wrapping her arms around Shadow's thick neck. She buried her face into his fur and cried, not from fear this time, but from relief. "You're all I have," she whispered through trembling sobs, "and you just saved me." From that night on, she no longer felt alone. Shadow was her protector, her partner, her home. They shared every meal, even if it was only a crust of bread or half a sandwich from a stranger's leftovers. They found warmth where they could, in bus terminals, under stairwells, behind steam vents, and leaned into each other as if they'd always belonged that way. The world may have forgotten them, but they had found something better than pity or rescue. They had found each other. It was a sharp February morning, sunlight finally breaking through gray skies to warm the frost-covered sidewalks. Emily sat on the cold stone steps of the city library, flipping through a worn newspaper she'd pulled from a bin. Shadow lay beside her, curled up, eyes watchful even in rest. They hadn't eaten since yesterday, but for a moment the sunlight and silence felt like peace. That's when Grace Whitmore noticed them. Dressed in a wool coat and red scarf, the elderly author was pulling a cart of library books when she saw the girl and the German shepherd sitting so still, so in sync. The dog's calm alertness struck her, how he seemed to guard the girl without fear. Grace watched as Emily pulled a crust of bread from her pocket, breaking it in half and offering the bigger piece to the dog. Shadow took it gently, his tail wagging once. As Grace approached the steps, her bag suddenly tore open, books and paper spilling. Before she could react, Emily was already helping. "I've got it, ma'am," she said softly. Grace thanked her, surprised by the girl's politeness. "You're very kind," Emily smiled faintly. "It's how my mom raised me." Grace looked closer, torn coat, tired eyes, trembling hands, and then to the dog, ever watchful. "You two take care of each other," she murmured. "He found me," Emily said. Grace hesitated, then made a choice. "I know it's unexpected, but would you and your dog come home with me, just for a few nights? I have a warm bed, food, a safe place." Emily blinked. "Really?" Grace nodded. Shadow looked up, ears twitching, sensing something had changed, and so they went. In Grace's warm, welcoming home, the fireplace glowed, stew simmered, and thick blankets offered comfort. That night Emily slept in a real bed for the first time in months. Shadow curled at her feet, breathing easy. Grace lingered at the door, watching them. She didn't yet know their full story, but she knew this was the beginning of something extraordinary. The house was quiet, wrapped in the kind of stillness that only came in the early hours of morning. Outside, a light rain tapped against the roof, and the town slept beneath a blanket of mist. Inside, Grace slept soundly in her room at the back of the house, while Emily dozed in the guest room down the hall, her arm draped over Shadow's warm, steady body. But something was wrong. A faint hum, a pop, then the smell. Burnt plastic and smoke. It started in the garage, an old faulty socket igniting a spark near a stack of stored boxes and old paint cans. Within minutes, flames licked along the ceiling beams, and thick smoke coiled through the house's lower floor, slipping under doors and curling into vents. Shadow stirred, his nose twitched. He opened his eyes, and in the dark he knew. He leapt off the bed in one motion, barking once, loud, urgent. Emily jolted awake, coughing, the sharp tang of smoke already stinging her throat. "Shadow!" she croaked, sitting up. He barked again, sprinting down the hallway, claws scratching against the wooden floor. Emily followed, eyes widening as she saw the smoke pouring in under the garage door, flames flickering faintly at the edges. "Oh my God!" Shadow was already clawing at Grace's bedroom door. When it opened, Grace stumbled out, coughing heavily, her eyes watery and confused. What's happening? The house is on fire!" Emily shouted, grabbing her arm. "We need to get out, now!" But Grace, disoriented and weak from the smoke, couldn't keep up. She collapsed near the kitchen doorway as the flames roared louder behind them. Shadow turned back. He nudged her, barked, then ran toward the front door and back, again and again urging them to follow, but Grace couldn't move. Emily tried to lift her, but the air was growing hotter, heavier. Then came the sound of sirens in the distance. Shadow bolted toward the front window, jumped up, and began barking furiously. Deep, desperate, and clear. When the fire truck pulled up, the firefighters saw him immediately. Huge, black and tan, pressed against the glass, barking like a siren of his own. They kicked the door open within seconds. Shadow didn't run. He turned and led them down the hall, past the thickening smoke, to the kitchen, where Grace lay gasping, and Emily clung to her. "She's here!" one firefighter shouted, hauling Grace up. Emily was coughing, eyes red, face streaked with tears and soot. Shadow stayed close, herded both women toward the door like a true protector, only exiting once they were safe. Outside, oxygen masks were pressed to their faces. Grace wept softly, clutching Emily's hand. Shadow stood beside them, smoke blackening parts of his coat, his chest heaving from exertion, but his eyes calm, watchful, steady. The house suffered heavy damage, but everyone survived. The local news picked up the story the very next morning. From cold streets to brave savior, German Shepherd rescues family from fire. The headline ran with a photo of Shadow sitting proudly between Emily and Grace, bandages wrapped gently around one of his paws, his ears perked as if listening for danger, even in peace. Neighbors brought gifts, the mayor sent a commendation, and children at the local school drew pictures of the brave dog who saved the rider lady. But for Emily, none of it was surprising. She knew what Shadow was capable of. He wasn't just a stray. He was her guardian, her family, and now he was the reason they all still had a tomorrow. Spring came slowly that year, like the world itself was waking up from something long and heavy. Trees budded with new green. The air felt softer, and in a quiet courtroom downtown, something beautiful happened. Grace Whitmore stood beside Emily, hand gently resting on the teenager's back as the judge smiled and stamped the final document. "Congratulations," he said warmly. "You are now officially a family." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she looked over at Grace, her protector, her mentor, and now her mother. She reached down to scratch Shadow's ears, and he leaned into her touch, tail wagging gently, as if he too understood that this moment was theirs. Grace enrolled Emily back in school. She didn't just pay for supplies and clothes. She read with her every night, encouraged her writing, and introduced her to a world Emily once thought she could never belong to. And Shadow, he adjusted beautifully. No longer just a guardian, he became part of everything. He followed Grace into her home office, lay beside Emily's desk as she scribbled story after story, and greeted visitors with a mix of calm nobility and tail-thumping affection. He had once been a shadow, but now he was light. In time, Emily found her voice, not just as a daughter, but as a writer. She began working on a story, one about a lost girl and a stray German shepherd, and the night everything changed. With Grace's encouragement, they launched a new dream together, Shadow's Light, a non-profit organization that provided food, shelter, and support for homeless youth and abandoned animals. Inspired by their own past, the mission was simple: to make sure no one ever felt unseen again. Donations poured in, volunteers lined up, local shelters partnered with them. Grace handled the advocacy and outreach. Emily mentored teens who walked in the same worn-out shoes she once did. Shadow became the organization's symbol, his image painted on the wall of the headquarters, eyes wise and warm. Then came the day of the awards ceremony. The city wanted to honor Shadow, the dog who saved 2 lives. A small gold medal hung from a blue ribbon was placed gently around his neck. Flashbulbs popped. The crowd applauded, and Emily stepped up to the podium, voice trembling, heart full. "I was 17. I had nothing. Not a home, not a future, not even hope," she said softly, her gaze dropping to Shadow, who lay beside the stage like he belonged there. "But one night, I gave a starving dog half a piece of bread, and he gave me a whole new life." The audience was silent, then rose in standing ovation. Years passed as years do. One afternoon, the sun slanted through the tall windows of a bookstore cafe. Emily, now in her 20s, sat at a signing table, a stack of freshly printed books beside her. The cover read, "Shadow's Light, a true story of rescue and redemption." A line of readers waited, each holding a copy. Under the table, Shadow lay peacefully, his muzzle now graying, his eyes still watchful. Beside him, a playful young German shepherd puppy bounced around, recently rescued and full of the same wild spark that once lived in him. Emily bent down, stroking Shadow's soft ears, and whispered with love, "You saved me when I had nothing. Now I'll make sure no one feels invisible again." Shadow sighed, content, as the wind rustled through the open door behind them, bringing with it the scent of spring, of beginnings, of hope. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness, a crust of bread, a shared glance in the cold, a hand held out when the world turns away, can become the gift of a lifetime. And a dog once lost in the streets can become the light that guides others home. In a world that often moves too fast to notice the quiet ones, a girl with nothing gave half a piece of bread to a forgotten dog, and in return, she gained a best friend, a family, and a future. Shadow's journey reminds us that love doesn't need a language, and that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can lead to the most unbelievable gift. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Amazing Paws Stories, where every paw print leads to a story worth telling, because no one is ever truly lost when love finds them.